Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take another look at our Centos server, and specifically, we are going to be looking at our Apache web server. This video assumes that you've already installed and done some minor configuration on your Apache web server. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to focus on actually adding a default page to our Apache web server because, well, quite frankly, this HTTP server test page isn't that interesting. Again, this HTTP server test page just simply shows us that our Apache web server and service are in fact actually running. Now, in an earlier video, I talked a little bit about the path to the various features in the Apache web server. Specifically, we are interested in two locations. We're interested in the etc httpd folder, which houses the configuration files associated with the daemon or the service. The second folder that we're interested in is going to be the var www HTML subfolder that allows for us to then host the files that will ultimately be served by our server. So to begin with, what we want to do is go ahead and launch a terminal. In this case here, I'm going to verify again that our HTTP server is in fact running. So we'll just simply do a status HTTPD. And not only will we see on the command line that it is still currently disabled, means that it will not start again at the next boot, but it is in fact running. And so you can verify that by simply just going to the local loopback adapter or the statically defined IP address, and on port 80 will be hosted the HTTP server test page. Now, what we'd like to do is we would like to have a custom made page, in other words, something that we have created. And in order to do that, and to understand how we're going to do that, the first thing we want to do is cd first to the root, then do an ls-l, and you'll notice that there is our var folder. We can cd to the var folder, and again, ls-l. You'll see that there is our www folder. We can cd to the www folder. Again, do an ls-l, and you'll see there's an HTML folder. And if I cd into the HTML folder, you will see that there are no files in it. Now, what we want to do is we somehow want to get an HTML file into this location. Now, there's a couple of different ways that we can go about doing this, including involving an FTP client, which I'm not going to cover in this particular video. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that for right now that our user, in my case, G. Myers, who also has sudo permissions, can in fact access or was intended to access this HTML folder. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch my favorite text editor, and I'm going to create an HTML file, not necessarily from scratch. I'm going to use a template that I have on hand, but I'm going to then place it in the HTML folder, name it correctly, such that the Apache web server can then see it and then will ultimately serve it up to the clients. And so the first thing that you want to do is you want to run sudo with one of your favorite text editors. And again, there's a couple of possibilities. You can use VI, you can use Nano, or you can use a little bit more sophisticated one like gedit, or you can download and install NetBeans or any of a host of other applications that give you better features. We're going to focus just on things that are already installed in our Linux distribution. In this case, I'm going to use gedit. Now, if you do not run sudo, that means that you're going to be running with the G. Myers permissions, or in other words, the permissions for the account that you're logged into. And again, that's probably okay, but you have to add then that account to have permissions to the Apache folder. Now, we'll cover how to do that in another video. In this case, we're just going to use sudo. And so essentially sudo, which is going to be running as root, is going to allow for you then to write that file to the HTML folder. Now, before we go any further, I want to say that that is definitely not the way you would want to do this in a production environment, because at this point with this gedit application, I can essentially modify any file on the file system. So you want to be really careful about what you do here. Now, I already have a template. Again, I'll try to provide this for you in the comments or give it to you in some other way, but effectively all I'm doing is some very, very basic HTML. In other words, you can see that I've mentioned the doc type, the HTML opening tag, the head, meta, title, body, and so on. In other words, not anything too terribly interesting. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it then from Notepad that I have on my host machine to my guest. And you'll see that I'm able to do this because I have installed the guest editions and I have enabled copy and paste between my host and my guests. Again, if you've not yet done so, I would encourage you to go back to one of the earlier videos to get this working, or you can just simply type this manually. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and put whatever comments you want to, extend this as far as you want to. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and fill in my little template here where I'm asking for you to put your name, in this case, Gregory Myers. And then we can go up here to save. And then you want to browse to the same location that we spoke about earlier in this video. And so you can find that under other locations, computer. You can go to the var folder. I'm not really sure why my sorting is upside down. I must have accidentally clicked on it. There's my var folder. There's my www folder. There's my HTML folder. And then the only thing that you want to be really careful of is the name of the file. It has to have a specific name for Apache to pick up on it as being the default page. In this case, it's going to be index.html. Again, if you're familiar with web development, at this point, you can have as much fun as you want to with adding features in this HTML file. But now if you come over to your terminal, and you'll notice that we're already in the HTML folder and do an ls-l, you'll see that there is already, or is now rather, an index.html file where earlier there was no file. Now, at this point, we can simply go back to our web browser and we can refresh the page both on 127.0.0.1 as well as that static IP address that I declared earlier with 192.168.2.100. And you can see that I now get a very primitive web page, but it's one that I have created. Again, I encourage you to dig into HTML, possibly add some more hyperlinks, create a nice landing page for yourself, maybe look into figuring out how to do images. But the other thing that is more relevant to us is now that you can, I split my screen very carefully, you can go over to your client and you can simply refresh your client. And now your client sees the updated web page. And again, I covered this in an earlier video, how you can verify connectivity between your client and your server. These two machines are sitting on the same VirtualBox network. Turns out, however, though, with a little bit of work with our networking and with bridging and adapter, we can actually make our virtual server be available to both virtual guests, your host, as well as possibly other physical machines on your network. So as always, I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.